Hello and welcome back to Revenge of the Drive-In. We've got two foreign movies today. We've been doing a lot of those recently, a lot of Asian ones too. But
we have, and I'm okay with it.
Lone Wolf and Cub, Sword of Vengeance, the first of the Lone Wolf and Cub movies. I think that were all released in 72. I don't know what it is about Japan. Because all the Street Fighter movies come out the same year. I think the sister Street Fighter movies do too. I don't know what it is about their series that they just pump them out like half-hour television episodes. But and you know what? We had the Rosin, the first Ring sequel, was released the day of the Ring. Yeah,
yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, they need to work on their schedule. I think.
Well, maybe they don't. I mean, maybe they're just predicted Netflix with the whole series on the same day. I don't know, but I don't understand their business model. But anyways, that's Lone Wolf and Cub, Sword of Vengeance from 72. And we've got Black Belly the Tarantula from Italy. It's a giallo from 71. Shudder says 70, but I'm pretty sure 71 is what I've seen. I'm your host, Patrick, and I'm joined here by
Jim. Hello, everybody. Hello, Patrick, my very old good friend. How are you?
Hey, I'm not that much older than you, but yeah.
No, I didn't mean that. You prick.
There was like something I was going to say to kind of start. Oh, yeah, you know what? I want to apologize. This is our first time recording, obviously, since our episode on the raid. Now, you, Jim, you always end up taking lead on these Asian movies, and then you complain about it because you can't pronounce the names. Half the time, you want to take lead on them, so I don't really understand what the issue is.
Okay. Secondly,
get the names wrong all you want. I don't care. Who am I to judge you? The entire last episode, I was referring to the raid as a Thai movie, and it's Indonesian. I knew it was Indonesian. I don't know what I was thinking. It wasn't until I was editing that I realized the mistake. I said Indonesian once. Every other time I said Thai. And I think you said Thai a few times too, probably just following my lead.
Yeah,
I'm sure you knew as well.
I was like, look, I remember I looked it up, but I was like, maybe
I don't know. So I'm in no position to judge. You do your worst with these names.
So I'm going to nail a lot of these Japanese names, I think. I've been watching lots of anime.
That's another reason why I don't understand why you complain about taking, like, you're the one who likes the Japanese stuff.
Yeah, no, I don't think I have complained about taking the Japanese movies ever, have I?
I don't know Japanese specifically, but you're always like, these names. Why am I always stuck with these names? Like, okay.
Okay, listen, I might
have fun with Giancarlo Giannini that I have, you know.
Okay, listen.
I'm not even sure if I'm saying Claudine Auger right. You know, when we talk about it.
Claudine Ogre.
Yeah, it could be.
Okay, let's not make me seem like a racist person who hates Asian people and their names.
No, you just dyslexic. It's different.
That's exactly, yeah. Well, speaking of this movie, actually, and speaking of anime, this
manga
series, yeah, exactly, started as a manga in 1970, and it ran for 6 years.
Which is the Western equivalent of manga? Would that be a comic book or a graphic novel? Do you know?
I kind of equate them to the same thing.
I view comic books and graphic novels as the same. I know people who know one would disagree, but like to me, it's all the same because I'm not interested. But
yeah, I mean, I think to be honest, we can just call them the same thing. I think with probably like a weekly release like this, it is more of like, well, actually, I guess it really is just like a comic book stroke graphic novel. You know,
is this a weekly release? Or are you talking about the movies because they all come out in 72? It's a throwback to the Flash Gordon serials.
I think the first 3 movies came out in 72 because I think the first 3 were directed by the same fella.
Okay, I thought they all were. You could be right. I didn't really do my research here.
I did a brief cursory glance.
I did my research way back when I started watching this series, but I only got like 3 movies in, and not because I dislike it, just because I got other shit to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, apparently.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Well, the first 4 are 72. Then there's a 73, a 74. So there's 6 of them. And there's the 1980 Shogun Assassin, which I had said last episode. I thought it was all of the movies combined into one. It's just the first 2 movies that were dubbed. They were dubbed, but they were kind of mixed together and re-edited to package to Western audiences, and apparently that movie really caught on. That movie was fairly popular and influential in the West.
Okay, yeah, because I saw that they had like renamed a bunch of the movies to release them. I guess before I even say anything else, the closest thing I have come to running across this story or this series of movies in my life is from the show Bob's Burgers. And I know that you're not an adult comedy cartoon guy, but there's an episode...
Because I'm an adult, yes.
But there's actually an episode where Bob and his youngest kid, they sit down and watch a movie called Banjo.
This is you talked about this with Once Upon a Time in the West. I remember this.
Exactly. And...
Because that was a play on harmonica.
Exactly. And in another episode, they sit down and watch a samurai movie together called Hawk and Chick.
Which is a takeoff of Hawk the Slayer, I take it?
Yeah, that's exactly it, yeah. Or Hawk Tua.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
It's dated already.
But yeah, so they were watching this movie called Hawk and Chick, as opposed to Lone Wolf and Cub, which is interesting. And I had looked it up. I was like, oh, is this like a real movie? And sure enough, Lone Wolf and Cub came up, and I thought, that's cool. I'll probably never watch it, forgetting that I have a podcast with a friend. But yeah, so that was the closest I came. So this is my first dive into this series.
Another thing I want to apologize for. I was mistaken. I said last episode, it's about a guy with a bad haircut walking around with the baby. No, the baby has the bad haircut. I forgot. I mixed it up.
Let's be honest. They both have bad haircuts.
Okay.
But getting back to this movie, though, so the manga was really popular. It has won all kinds of, like, accolades. It has been cited as, I guess, like this origin trope for man protecting child on a dangerous journey.
Yeah, The Mandalorian is what I think of, especially because the original Star Wars was so influenced by like Kurosawa and some of the stuff from Japan that like, oh, modern Star Wars is kind of doing their version of that with Baby Yoda.
Yes, yeah, and I didn't even think of that. And honestly, I was struggling to picture a story that I could think of off the top of my head that had this kind of relationship on screen. The closest I came to was thinking actually about another Japanese title. Yeah. The closest But the closest I came to was Berserk, which it's not really the same, but it's about like this lone wandering swordsman who protects various people and at one point does have like people close to him that he protects. And
I would have to see it again, but I'm wondering if the classic 50s Western Shane is a bit like this, because the character of Shane, whatever, he does stuff. I don't really remember the movie too well. Alan Ladd, I think. And I don't really remember a relationship with the kid other than the end of the movie is famously the kid shouting for him as he leaves. So apparently he has some kind of bond. I don't know if he's like with the kid 24/7, kind of like this. Probably isn't.
Well, and again, like apparently this is such a big trope, but I can't really think of anything else, so I'll just have to trust my sources for this. I'm also not familiar with the manga, or the manga, but I'm curious to know if there's anything in the manga that has been shot in the movie, because there's a lot of scenes, especially
if there's
early
like
on.
Specific like recreations of some of the animations.
Yes.
Or not the animations, the drawings, the illustrations.
Exactly, yeah. And because I'm curious, because early on, there's a lot of shots that look very kind of anime-y, manga-y, that it looks like they would have drawn that by hand somewhere. And I guess really the last thing that I have to say about this is that, it was released in 1972, directed by Kenji Misumi. Kazuo Koike, he wrote the manga and he also wrote the screenplay for this movie, and I think for like the next couple, if not all of them. And then also, have you come across this term? This is my first time coming across this term. This is a Japanese shambara film, which is just like it just means like a sword fighting film.
Yeah, I mean, not specifically. I would also consider this film a Jidaigeki film, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong, but that is like a period film in Japan. And a lot of ninja samurai movies are, well, I guess samurai films are by definition period films, but many ninja films as well.
A lot of these samurai film, ninja films, stuff like that, they're set in the Edo period, which lasted, I think, from like the 1600s to like the 1800s, didn't it?
I'm reading 1603 to 1868, so that's a really broad range there.
Yes.
So, I mean, the important thing to note, there are guns. It's just swords are still the weapon of choice.
Japan at this point is like the land of the samurai, and at this point in real life, they're kind of cut off from the rest of the world, except for, I believe, the Dutch.
1868 is probably when the U.S. admiral showed up there, I would guess.
Yeah,
sometime in the
good
19th
old
century.
Gunboat diplomacy. But yeah, so every time you see like a lot of like these Japanese period pieces, they're all kind of set in like this 200-year period, because this is the age of samurais and the wandering swordsmen and ninjas and assassins and people trying to assassinate the shogun and daimyos, which are lords. And
What
stuff.
is a shogun, by the way? It's not quite an emperor.
I think I could equate it to like the prime minister. I'm not as well read on my Japanese history or as I should be. Well, there's also the term daimyo, and that's kind of like lord under the shogun. So at the very beginning of this movie, we see that little kid. He's a daimyo of a land, of a territory. The guy that's coming into that country bumpkin territory, he's a daimyo. He's a lord loyal to the shogun.
Okay.
Return to the vanished kingdoms of ancient times. Journey through a lost empire of mad wizards and barbaric passions. Behold the saga of a legendary warrior, a loving father who has the power of a dozen armies in one sweep of his mystic blade.
Can we talk about this opening scene just for a second, or do you have stuff you want to go?
No. I was gonna get into this opening scene. Yeah.
Well, yeah. What a way to open a film. Like, we're not messing around. We've got child execution like right off the bat, and it's like what makes this scene awesome isn't that they're gonna kill a kid. It's like, I mean, it is that, but it's like the brutality of it.
It's just so cold and like
exactly
political,
the coldness.
You know,
if Ito is doing this like in a legal fashion because he's like the official executioner or whatever, what does that say about the people he works for? Like, this is so messed up. This is so evil. Also, it's a really cute kid.
A very cute kid. Yes. We're introduced to our main character at the beginning of the movie, Ito Ogami. He is the shogun's personal executioner, so he gets sent around all around Japan to execute the people who aren't falling in line with the shogun's orders or wishes or whatever. And he kills this kid. He has to execute this kid right at the beginning of the movie. God knows what this kid did to the shogun, but the shogun wants him gone.
I'm assuming the kid didn't do anything. It's the kid's parents did, and they might have executed the parents already, but as we see, any death of a family member just means someone is going to be out for revenge.
Mm-hmm. After this scene, we get a bit of an explanation about how life and society kind of works in this period.
I think life works through flashbacks mostly.
Yeah,
In this film, this is most. I was wondering this. Why didn't they just tell this movie from A to B to C? Why did we start with all of this happen and then show it during flashbacks? Like, I think the film would have had the same impact. I think.
You're probably right. Well, we'll get into that in a minute.
I mean, there is a source material, so maybe there's a reason the source material did it that way.
Yeah, perhaps the manga
to me,
did
the
it
movie
that way.
didn't justify it.
Just to briefly explain, the Shogun has a network of ninja spies, and their
as one does.
Their role is to come up with reasons or find reasons why you can get rid of these daimyo, these lords. You know, perhaps they're secretly against the Shogun, and if so, these ninjas will figure it out and report back to the Shogun. And then you have these assassins who are charged with killing all of these officials who are weeded out by these ninjas. And then you also have Ito Ogami himself, who is charged with the execution of various officials. But all these groups are run by 3 different clans. So you have like Ogami, he's in his own clan. He's the executioner. And I can't talk. He's
kind of just his own thing. He doesn't really have a clan. That's kind of his downfall.
Well, he's the Ogami clan. He's the Ogami family.
I thought that's just his family, though.
Yeah, so I mean, like his
because the kid is Ogami somebody.
Yeah, what's his name? It's like it's a great name. It's
Daigoro.
Yes, that's it.
However one pronounces it.
Daigoro. Is that it?
Oh God! Now I'm doing it. Tomisaburo Wakayama, who plays Ogami Ito.
Yeah.
His angry grunting, much of his dialogue is delivered like angrily grunting. I know,
it's so amazing.
It's obviously a whole different language, so I wouldn't know, but like part of me thinks I would need subtitles for this even if I knew Japanese, because I don't think the enunciation is there.
No.
But that's just that's just how he talks, and I gotta say, like, the emotion comes through when he does that, like the anger, the
100%.
feelings of betrayal or whatever.
Yeah, you can feel his or I should say his presence is displayed in full on screen, in whatever emotion he's portraying. But there's this other clan that's kind of pulling strings behind the scenes, and it's like the I don't even remember the name for this. It's like the Yagyu clan or something.
Sounds right. Yeah, there's something like that.
So the whole story of this movie is that you have Ito, the Shogun's executioner, and he is set up by the Yagyu clan to make it look like that he is against the Shogun. And the Yagyu clan, under that pretense, they attempt to kill him. Ito discovers this pretty quickly, that he's being set up, and he has to kind of fight his way out. And after he fights his way out, he becomes a wandering swordsman.
They also kill his wife.
Yes, yeah, which...
We learn that in flashback, I guess.
Yeah.
No, you're right. The wife's dead, though. And also, was it them, again, because you mentioned the different clans, who's actually responsible for
They're the assassin clan.
The ninjas?
No, there's a ninja clan, then like an assassin clan, and then there's the executioner.
But ninjas are assassins. This is I'm not ready for this.
Well, there's ninja spies, ninja assassins, I guess.
Listen, I've seen some bad B movies. There's ninjas, everything. There's ninja demons and
there's Beverly Hills
3,
Ninjas.
The Dominations, Beverly Hills Ninjas, which I've not seen, fortunately. There's Zombie versus Ninja.
Oh my god. Well, here Ito fights his way out. He kind of wins his freedom, and he just becomes like this traveling sword for hire. And his son becomes a son for hire.
Son for hire, yeah.
As he's pushing around
when we
in this
first
pram.
see that banner, I thought he was like willing to sell his son into slavery. I guess it's just... Well, the first time he sells him, and he doesn't even really want to sell him, there's this... It's a really odd scene, but I found it really neat. That one woman who, like, is kind of crazy and lost her baby runs up to Daigoro saying it's hers, and then she, like, demands that he eat from her breast, and the poor kid is just like, Dad, do I have to? And Dad's
nods.
like, yeah, you do. Like, you're going to get paid for it. And it's a really weird scene, but it also goes to show, like, it's like, you go through that early stages of a divorce where you're just like out there doing weird stuff. And I know he's not divorced, but that's just what it kind of felt like.
Well, then even too, like in that same scene, the mother of this woman in hysterics is actually there, and she kind of explains to Ito.
Yeah, she explained it. Yeah, because
she's like,
the woman is too hysterical to explain anything.
And then she goes to give him money, and he says, "Oh no, that's okay. My son was hungry anyways." And like,
that's right. Yeah, they didn't take the money that time.
Yeah, and you can tell.
Is that a service that the son is for hire for ordinarily?
Yeah. So it's a whole kind of gray area. I think his samurai code stepped in, right, and he did it because he's a nice guy. He didn't take the woman's money because he was like,
that's
she's obviously in an issue.
One of my issues with this film was that, I mean, I wanted Ito. I wanted him to be so much worse of a human being than the movie is. They make him honorable, which I understand. I get that. But again, my connection to a lot of these Japanese movies is spaghetti westerns, and I love the spaghetti westerns. Everybody's gray. Even the heroes are kind of assholes. Yeah. And then also, of course, we mention it every episode now, The Street Fighter, one of the greatest films ever made. Sonny Chiba in that is the absolute worst human being ever, and he's the hero of the film. And I was hoping for something like that. I mean, not every movie can be The Street Fighter. I get that.
No. And here you have a character that is so bound in honor that it's almost impossible for him to stoop to the level of like disgusting poor person in Japan, in Edo era Japan. Yeah,
that's, I mean, later on, that's why those characters think he won't sleep with that one prostitute.
Exactly. Yeah.
But he kind of does it basically just, I think it's mostly for her. I think it's maybe to keep her from getting killed or something. Yeah.
Well, listen, so in 30 seconds, I'm going to finish this synopsis here, then we'll talk about all these scenes, because I really want to talk about these scenes. So this wandering ronin, this wandering sword for hire, he eventually gets hired by this, like, assistant to this daimyo, this chamberlain. He says, hey, my daimyo is going to be assassinated by somebody in the household that I work for. I'm going to pay you to go to this spa town and save my lord, by killing all these guys. And what's his name? Ito agrees. He says, okay. And guess what? He goes to this spa town and he has his sword stolen, but then he gets it back, and guess what? He kills all of these guys, including the guy in the household that was plotting against the daimyo. Mm-hmm. And then the movie ends. It kind of ends abruptly, but it's a great watch.
And we did kind of... The wife getting murdered is a big part of the movie that we've kind of brushed past. I mean... Well,
really, the two biggest parts of this movie are both in flashback. The first flashback happens earlier on, and the second one happens later on.
Are you calling this the second one when Daigoro, who's this baby that doesn't have full consciousness, decides between suicide and becoming a samurai warrior? Yes. What's the term for the wandering with the ronin?
And he doesn't even call himself a ronin. He calls himself like a sword for hire, or
sure. I'm sure himself? In the Shogun Assassin dub that word gets thrown around there. And when I'm editing this, if I include audio clips from it, it will be from Shogun Assassin, because that's obviously there's dialogue that we can understand, or if I include bits of the trailer.
Now, getting into these scenes, I think my favorite scene from beginning to end would be the entirety of the first flashback. I don't know if you'd agree with me.
I almost have to be reminded of what's included in it, because it is a long scene.
Yeah, so the first flashback we get as, almost immediately after this crazy woman makes Daigoro suckle on her tit. This is now the story where we see and understand why Ito's wife was murdered. So, long story short here, he goes home, he comes back from an execution, and in the middle of the night, as he's in his family shrine with his son in his arms, his wife and all the servants in their household are murdered by the Yagyu clan. He comes back to, he hears his wife scream. And
it's because he assassinated one of them, right? Even though that was his orders.
No, it's because they have a member of their own clan who wants to be the Shogun's assassin, and they want to oust him. And he spends all night mourning over his wife, and he's wondering who did this. And in the morning, this assassin clan shows up, and they say, hey, we had some samurai kill themselves outside of our clan headquarters, and they said that you're a bad guy, you're betraying the shogun, and the evidence for it will be in your family shrine. Which a little earlier, as soon as his wife was attacked, we saw one of the assassin clan guys run into the shrine and put a memorial tablet on the shrine altar there.
I thought it was just a clock.
Yeah, at first that's what I thought too. I was like, what is that?
No, but this so when you say your favorite part is the end of this flashback scene, I am assuming that's the fight that goes into the water then?
Yes.
Okay, that's a good one. I don't know if it's my favorite. No, my favorite scene, and hell, this might be a flashback. No, it's probably not a flashback because the baby's with him. But when and you'll have to fill in which clan this is. It's the one run by the old guy who's clearly not that old.
So that's the same clan.
He's probably the oldest actor in the movie, but he's clearly in old age makeup. And in this scene in particular, he gets an extreme close-up, and you can see that the facial hair and the eyebrows are taped onto him. Yeah. You could see whatever it is, whatever gum is used or whatever. But they're all going to kill him, but then he removes part of his clothing and says, you can't kill me because I bear this...
The Shogun's seal.
The Shogun's seal. And specifically that it's on the front and back of the clothes. You can't possibly stab me without ruining the seal, which is kind of interesting, but also cut off his head and, there might be another, Eastern reason that I don't understand. But so they decide, okay, it's going to be me against your best swordsman. We're going to have a duel. And they choose it to have it outside in the field. And this felt very it was just visually very interesting. This wouldn't surprise me if this is straight from the manga. Mm-hmm. But they have this showdown. And we have the voiceover from the fake old guy. Oh, two evenly matched fighters, but Ito,
my best fighter,
is staring into the sun, and it's like that. And with two evenly matched fighters, that could be the difference. And the two charge at each other, and at the last moment, Ito ducks, and Daigoro's exposed head is there, and he's got a piece of metal on it, a mirror. And it shines the light, the sun, back at the other guy, and then Ito beheads him in a beautiful move. I thought that scene was neat. That scene was like great. It's like that. It's the kind of, and again, I'm sorry, spaghetti westerns are my thing, but it's that kind of Clint Eastwood makeshift bulletproof vest type cleverness that I like out of some of these characters sometimes.
You know what it actually reminded me of? It actually reminded me of Raiders of the Lost Ark when Indiana Jones just shoots the guy wielding the sword. Hear me out here. So the old fella, the grandpa of the Yagyu clan, he's, again, narrating what's about to happen. He says, like, oh, my fighter here, they're both equally skilled, but he's chosen a position with the sun at his back.
Retsudo is his name, by the way.
Okay, yeah. And he's like, my fighter has the sun at his back, whereas Ito is facing into the sun. And, obviously you have to be smart on the field of battle to win these wars. And that's going to really come down to who wins this. And he's kind of prepping you for what you think is going to be a great sword fight.
Oh, so you like the narration is kind of the bait and switch almost?
Yeah, and you're like, oh man, this is going to be a fucking dope-ass fight. And then as
so
Ito's
quick.
running, he just ducks, and his son has a mirror taped to his head.
Yeah.
But the beheading is so awesome, and the fountain of blood shooting out of the guy's neck is great.
Well, that's something worth noting in general. This movie, the blood is insane. So the whole reason I brought up Shogun Assassin is so I saw this video recently on YouTube. There's a YouTube channel, The Bad Movie Bible. I know I've shown you a few videos from them, Jim.
Yes.
That guy's awesome, and he does this like an hour-long video about like the ninja craze in the 1980s and where that came from, and he talks about like some Japanese ninja movies that didn't really catch on from the 60s, but it was like 1980-81 was like the big year because The Octagon with Chuck Norris, Enter the Ninja was 81, and then Shogun Assassin was released in 80. And there was just a funny line about the Lone Wolf and Cub movies about like all of the ninjas having incredibly high pressure circulatory systems because the blood does not leak; it sprays in this movie.
It's like somebody knocked the head off of a faucet.
Yeah. So this fed my Street Fighter Sonny Chiba appetite a bit. I mean, it's a different style of violence, but it's still that kind of like, because it's like this movie. In different hands. And I'm not saying it isn't a serious movie, but it's like, this could just be like a brooding drama. You wouldn't expect it to be like the most violent movie of its time, but it is.
This is a kind of movie that Tarantino watched and was like, oh yeah, that's cool.
That one Kill Bill scene, the famous one that everyone loves,
in Volume 1.
This movie. Mm-hmm. That's most of the fight scenes. I mean, the energy isn't as high in this movie. It's not as fast. I don't know how much of that is due to the lead actor not really seeming like he's in great shape. I hesitate to say that because he wears the baggy clothes, but he's got kind of a round face, doesn't he? Like,
yeah, he's got a round face, but then in like the one scene where he's got to like bang this hooker, you're like, what? He's not in that bad of shape.
Yeah, when he's hanging out in the hot spring. Okay, that's fair.
Going back to this first flashback, I love everything about it. But again, this fight scene at the end where, so at this point, he realizes that this whole clan is trying to set him up just to kill him, just so that they can take over the executioner role. So he just starts fighting back. And he leads them, like all the fighters in this clan, like into the river. And he just starts cutting them down in the river, which is a very kind of like anime-y thing, just the way that the scene was framed. There's like the bridge.
Well, he's not fully in the river. He does, when there's one guy left, he actually jumps into the river, and then I think it's the same old guy, Retsudo, who's looking at that, and he like narrates, or he might even say this out loud, but he says something about his style of fighting, his style of sword fight, like, oh, him in the water, oh, that's that's a mistake for my guy, like,
which is like his grandson, by the way.
Yeah, and I'm assuming there's something about like, if he's in the water, you don't know where the sword is. He just kind of ended up killing the guy, and it didn't really seem like being in the water was why.
Exactly, but it was a very kind of like, if you watch a lot of anime, it's a very kind of anime thing. He's like, oh, this sword style gets its power from being in the water. Oh no, my grandson's made a grave mistake. And then also, after he kills the grandson and he's talking to Retsudo, there's always like this close-up on Retsudo's face, and it's just his face with like the blue sky background. And again, that was like another frame where I thought maybe this is from like a panel from the manga. Okay. Where it's just like it's a close-up of Retsudo's face and he's...
Well, and Retsudo's look, too, especially because we know that's not real hair, facial hair, and eyebrows because of those close-ups, you can tell. Mm-hmm. You wonder if that's like specifically a recreation of a character.
Exactly, yeah. And that's what I'm wondering. To flash forward to that second flashback, which, by the way, just for the audience, nothing really happens between flashbacks other than him
bangs a prostitute.
Well, is Ito walking to this spa town, interacting with all these awful people who are killing and raping people, him having sex with a prostitute, and then the movie ending?
Well, the ending.
Well, okay, yeah. Well,
I mean,
get to
it's
that.
the big fight scene at the end. I mean, you are overlooking that.
Yes. I mean, it's a good fight scene. But in the flashback that you were talking about that happens before he gets to the town, I love the beginning of it when when he's dressed, him and his son, in the white execution robes, and then the messengers show up and they're like, oh, we're glad you've already dressed yourself in the execution robes. And he starts laughing and he sits up and he's like, no, we're wearing these because we're going to be walking the path of the demons. And this is just a singular
there were some
departure.
really good, really interesting lines about like, and it's even done visually with like,
with that fire and water
diagonally over them and water on the side. Like they are choosing the middle path between heaven and hell, basically.
Yeah. But this whole scene, like just his speech about choosing to fight is just great. And then when he actually does pull his sword on everybody, that fight scene like in his actual house is awesome because at one point he like cuts two guys' swords in half and one sword tip flies up into the ceiling and the other one flies straight into a guy's neck and he just starts shooting blood all over the place. And then by the time he comes out of his house, his white robe is just covered in red blood.
Mm-hmm.
He just looks so cool. And then in that same scene, there's a guy who's like up against the front gate of his house. He slices the guy's shoulder so hard that he not only kills the guy in an instant, but he slices through bamboo and rope tying the gate closed on the other side of the gate. Through the gap in the door. It was just so cool. There were so many things in this movie that I just thought were so cool.
So can we talk about the last fight scene there, the one in town?
No, not yet, because there's one more
Jesus.
scene that I think is great, and it's when he runs into the Chamberlain who wants to hire him, and he's got like those two fellas who are helping him, like his two right-hand men, and he's like, I think that's fucking the executioner of the Shogun. And his buddies are like, yeah? And he goes, yeah, you have to attack him. If you attack him and kill him, then he's not the executioner. If he kills you, he's definitely the executioner. And he kind of lures him into a trap. Remember, he asks him to do this job and to count money. And as he's sitting there on the floor about to count the money, his two buddies hop in behind Ito. And he just doesn't even look up. He just grabs the sword and kills both of them, like instantly. And he goes, okay, tell me about the job you want me to do. It's just so cool. Anyways, yeah, let's talk about the end scene now.
So last scene, I'm going spaghetti western again. Two of my favorite things. In one way, this kind of improved something. So way back when we talked about Django, starring famous ninja Franco Nero, a complaint I had about that movie was he's dragging this coffin around and it's like this thing of mystery, but then they spoil the mystery too soon because he pulls out a Gatling gun 20 minutes into the movie from it. And it's like, okay, if we could have gone an hour not knowing what's in that coffin, that would have been so much cooler. This is a little bit like that because he's been pushing the cart around the entire time. It's less mysterious because he's just pushing the cart around with the kid in it.
Yeah.
But suddenly he's got all sorts of weapons hidden in the cart. That's pretty cool. So that was like an improvement on the Django thing.
Yes.
And then also just in general, the hidden weapons thing. So other than the Dollars trilogy, my favorite series of spaghetti westerns is the Sartana movies.
Oh, yeah, and they've all got super cool names.
They've got awesome titles. I've mentioned them before. Knowing Italian films, they probably have unofficial sequels. I think there's a Django versus Sartana or something. As that series progresses, one of my favorite things about that is the sheer creativity in how many different places Sartana can pull a gun out from. Like, it just becomes like he's got these like hidden guns. There was like, I think it was the fourth one, which in some ways was probably the worst because I think that was the one that had a different actor. But like, the climax of that movie had him like pulling a rifle out from like somewhere where you would not have expected a rifle to come from, and he shoots a guy, and it's like the coolest thing ever. It's like, what a way to end a film that I'm able to overlook. It's like Blood Debts. It was a bit like that.
Okay, yeah, gotcha.
So this had a little bit of that.
It did.
I appreciate that.
And it was a gift that kept giving because, like, in this spa town, there's a guy, Kanbei, that's his name. he's in cahoots with the guy who's attempting to kill this daimyo. But as he's running this town, like, they're just all, like, mistreating the people in this town, all of his men. Again, they're raping people, killing people, forcing Ito to have sex with this prostitute, just kind of, like, further degrading him.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one guy who throws knives, and he thinks that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And...
I mean, it is.
Yeah, it is pretty cool, yeah. But this Kanbei guy, when he first meets Ito, he says, "What's your name? Like, have we met before?" And Ito gives him a fake name. And he goes, "Oh, yeah, I guess we haven't met before." But he's got Ito's sword. His sword was, like, confiscated from him. And it's, like, this battle-ready, high-quality sword. So he's been wondering about it. And finally, he comes to the conclusion that he's like, holy shit, this is Ogami the Executioner. Because there's, like, this samurai that he wanted to fight, but he was so sickly, the samurai's like, "I'd rather just kill myself. Can you be my second executioner?" And then he looks over and he sees this monk praying, and he goes, "Executioner? Pray? Another word for pray is Ogami." And then he goes, "Oh my god, this is the executioner." And as he's telling his men, like, "Don't fight him, you're gonna lose, don't fight him," the guy who throws the knives is like, what's the worst that can happen? And before he can even throw a knife, Ito just pulls, like, this sword out of the cart and just stabs him with it, like, throws it and stabs him. There's just blood shooting out all over the place.
And also what was neat, the closest we got to that Sonny Chiba kind of bloodthirst that I love, was that even the guy who was trying to tell his men not to kill him, and he's, like, begging for mercy, he's like, "Don't kill me," like, Ito still kills him.
Yeah,
like, okay,
yeah.
this...
Also, I like the guy, that guy's other right-hand man, like, when Ito has that, like, pole sword, he just spins around and cuts the guy's legs off.
How can you have more than one right-hand man? Who is he, Machamp?
But yeah, there was just so much limb severing in this movie that it was just really fun to watch.
Oh my god. There's... I don't even remember which scene it is, but he swipes at a guy's legs.
Yeah, that's literally what I was just saying.
Yeah. And then it's you just see, like, the knee down, like, still standing upright.
It's so
it's
awesome.
Amazing stuff.
That's really the movie. I mean, the story's pretty lacking. The weakest part of this movie is pretty much...
The story is...
Can I actually retract what I just said?
Sure.
What I should say is the weakest part of the story is everything that doesn't happen in flashbacks.
I would agree with that. Which is part of the reason why didn't you just tell the story chronologically? That was one of my takeaways, was I just don't really understand why they told it this way.
And I think you're right. I think because it was adapted from a manga, mangas have, like, a different style of storytelling, or even they tell stories at vastly different paces than movies. So I think because
they're scams, they need you to keep buying the next one.
Well, but if you think about it, right, it was released the first manga was released in 1970, and it was a weekly manga, right?
How many were there though? Like, was it a weekly thing for 3 months or?
I couldn't tell you. I had it pulled up on my screen earlier, but I'm not going to look it up now. But there was a lot. But then you also got to remember that the guy who wrote the manga also wrote the screenplay for this.
That's true.
So he was probably writing it exactly or close enough to how he wrote his manga. Well, too, I was going to say this movie ends abruptly, and I know that there's sequels. So I think it ends abruptly because there's a sequel coming. Same with the manga. Like
the Shogun Assassin, which is the first two movies together, probably just flows right into the next one.
Yeah, I would assume.
That's probably a movie that has somewhat disappeared now that this one is more widely available. I think over time those like Godzilla King of the Monsters, the US re-edit dub version of the original Japanese movie, that seems to be harder and harder to find now that just the original Godzilla is so much more widely accessible than it was in the 90s.
Yeah. And I think now that you have probably most, if not all of these movies on streaming, right? You can literally organically flow into the next one.
Well, Shogun Assassin apparently is streaming on the Criterion channel.
But I guess, like, all in all, I don't really have any complaints about this movie. I don't think it's a boring movie. I quite like the story.
Hell no.
The part that drags the most for me is when he's actually in the village after he's had his sword taken.
Okay. And all the stuff in the present, is
and when he's weaker. Like talking to the prostitute and all the people who've been imprisoned in this house and stuff, like, But again, I'm looking at it as that it's a smaller part of a larger story, so I can't really hate on it for that.
Well, I'll try. My complaint is I think the story would have been stronger if the flashback stuff was just the first act of the movie and we kind of just progressed from there. Mm-hmm. I don't think we learn that much more about Ito's relationship with Daigoro from seeing that scene where he basically is secretly wanting Daigoro to elect to commit suicide.
Yeah.
That we see that halfway through the movie. If that's just the second or third scene of the movie, I think it might even be more meaningful. Mm-hmm. That's a great scene, by the way.
It is.
Like he sets out these two things, like a sword and like a ball.
Yeah.
And he's like, you will choose, you will crawl to these. If you crawl to one, you will go to your mother in heaven. If you crawl to the other, you will become a ronin with me. And you can tell he actually wants the kid to choose suicide.
I know. He's like, oh, my path is going to be long and dangerous, and I can't take my son. I hope he chooses the ball so I can kill my own son.
Yeah, but no, it's a very good movie. It's a very good movie. From what I remember, I liked this more than I did the first time I saw it. From what I remember, I liked the second one more. And from what I remember, I thought the third one was the one I liked the least. But
okay, well, I'll have to trust you, but I'm
there's
sure
still that same kind of bloodletting, I'm sure. So
listen, as long as that's in it, I'm fine.
Speaking of bloodletting, let's talk about it with
that was good.
With specifically paralyzed people.
Okay.
Black Belly of the Tarantula, 1971, directed by Paolo Cavana, featuring an all-star cast, including 2 Bond girls, kind of 3, if you count Barbara Boucher, because she's in the 1967 non-Eon Casino Royale parody. Along
we'll
with, I think Ursula Andress is in that as well. But, there's Peter Sellers and who knows. Peter Sellers married to a Bond girl, though, if I'm not mistaken. Was he married to Britt Eklund, maybe? He was married to somebody.
I'll look it up right now.
Barbara Bach is in this, of course. She's from The Man with the Golden Gun, I think. I get her and Eklund mixed up. She's from The Man with the Golden Gun. Eklund is the spy who... No, Barbara Bach is the spy who loved me. She's Agent XXX.
He was married to Britt Eklund.
Okay. Yeah, no, Barbara Bach is Ringo's wife. Yes, so Barbara Bach, who's in this movie, is from The Spy Who Loved Me. She plays Agent XXX, one of the best Bond girls in terms of character, one of the worst in terms of performance. Barbara Bach, perhaps before, perhaps simultaneously, had a career just in films in Europe. I've seen her in a lot of like random-ass Italian exploitation movies kind of like this. She's in The Great Alligator, which is awful.
Oh, okay.
As we know from Clint Eastwood, having a career in Europe isn't... Or Cliff Booth, or whatever his name is, in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yes, yeah.
Having a career in Italy or in Europe isn't necessarily an indication that they're a bad actor, but it might be a hint, I mean, she is, I assume, a British actress, so it's a shorter flight for her than it would be for Eastwood. But so we get Claudine Auger, the stunning beauty from Thunderball, who I've seen in a few Italian movies. Never strikes me as that beautiful. I don't know what it was about 1965 Auger, but yet to recreate that magic.
I'm sitting there with you, buddy. I agree.
I don't know. She's kind of the lead in The Bay of Blood, which is probably my second or third favorite giallo movie ever. So and also the lead is Giancarlo Giannini, who I didn't really know. The name was like vaguely familiar. He's a reasonably big part of Casino Royale, not the one with Barbara Boucher, but the one with Daniel Craig. He's the guy. He's the older Italian guy with the mustache.
Oh, he's great.
I mean, it's 40 years later, 35 years later. You wouldn't necessarily recognize him, but
he
apparently was a pretty big actor.
Right?
Possibly. I don't remember Casino Royale that much, and I remember Quantum of Solace even less. So, and then also again, because I love these giallo movies, there's even more familiar faces, at least to me, including his wife, Anna Tellini, played by Stefania Sandrelli. I know I've seen her in a number of giallo movies. Beautiful woman. Probably my favorite actor in this movie. I just thought she was really good. She was just like, I don't know, she was just like a fun wife next door type character. But she was in a few movies I've seen, and apparently later in her life, like in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s. Apparently she's a great actress because she's like won a ton of awards for like Italian film, their versions of the Academy Awards. So you wouldn't necessarily know that here, although I do think she's good. But yeah, all-star cast.
Yeah, literally.
Beautiful cast because we start off right away with a naked Barbara Boucher, which is I would argue one of the best ways to start off a film, right up there with child execution.
Night. A time for quiet. A time for evil. Behind the door. Through the window. A time for terror. A terror that leaves a tiny clue, a pattern, of blood. Repeated again and again and again.
But yeah, so she's getting a massage from a blind guy. And then she gets a phone. The massage is interrupted with the phone call. Barbara Bach actually answers. Barbara Bach is the secretary or the receptionist, the hostess.
Mm-hmm.
So the phone call, it's from her husband. Her husband's mad about something. She goes home, and the husband's pissed. He's slapping her. He's shaking her around.
He's like, you dumb, cheating horse.
And he's like, yeah, because you've had an affair. At first I thought she was talking about, like, that it was the masseuse. I thought maybe that was what was going on. But there's this photograph, a photograph which would be proudly hanging on my wall if I had access to it, of Barbara Bach naked with another man. And she tears it in half. And that's kind of that. Mm-hmm. And that scene...
Well, she denies it, too. She's like,
well, she denies it as well, which is, you know, when confronted with that, it's kind of an odd strategy. But yeah, and also they're separated.
No, are they?
That comes up, I suppose, after she's killed when they're interrogating the husband, who, by the way, the husband makes no effort to not seem suspicious, which, as a film watcher, tells me that he isn't the murderer pretty early on. But, like, Inspector Tellini, Giancarlo Giannini, it rhymes, should be really looking for that husband. Well, I guess, yeah, I mean, later on, too, I guess he does some questionable things. But, so at night, Barbara Boucher lets out the dog, comes back inside. I thought she took a bottle of wine or champagne up to bed. They find out at the crime scene later, they say it's like sparkling water or something.
Oh, it definitely looked like a bottle of wine.
Yeah, I think we got a drunk housewife on our hands.
Well, and she's Italian, so come on.
Barbara Boucher, I believe, is German for the record.
And she's German, even more.
Yeah, well, it's not beer. By the way, she was in an episode of Star Trek.
Oh.
Star Trek, they cast some beautiful women in, like, small bit parts, Terry Garr, etc. But yeah. She was born, very interesting time to have been born in Germany, 1943. You know. Anyways, when she gets killed, but, so the classic giallo setup, black glove, we don't see them. And the killer has these, like, needles, and you see him or her pulling them from presumably their home and putting some kind of drug in them, and Barbara Boucher is stabbed with it, and you'd think she's just dead because she's just kind of on the bed, eyes open, and then he kind of cuts into her.
Ugh, yeah.
And we find out later that what this drug is for the needle, this paralyzes them, and so they are alive when they're being carved into. And this is, of course, we learn later the tarantula name comes from this, is that this kind of venom there's something the tarantula does. That whole tarantula scene that's one of the weirdest scenes in the movie. It's like completely out of nowhere. Stuff? It's a complete, I guess, red herring, but it's also like, I don't know. But yeah, so we meet Inspector Tellini, who I think is a really interesting character for a movie like this. Giallos, oftentimes, the people investigating the crimes are not police officers. In this case, obviously, we have a police officer, but he's, like, doesn't want to be. He's, like, done.
Yeah, he's like, I want to quit. I had to, like, a woman died today. I don't want to do this job anymore.
He's making reference to the Barbara Boucher death, and he's like, that's this naked woman. Like, he's talking to his wife very openly about it, and it's just like, this job just sucks. Like, no, I'm not ready for this. I'm not prepared for this. How could anyone be? And his wife at home is, like, super loving. They're fun together. But yeah, as I mentioned, the husband really not making much of an effort to not seem suspicious. He's like, no, I wasn't aware of any infidelity. And then they find the torn photograph, only the Barbara Boucher side, which is the side that I want hung up in my room. And so it's like, obviously the husband knew about something. If there was blackmail involved, we don't know. So there's a woman, like a friend, a neighbor, who comes forward and she's like, oh, I got a phone call from Barbara Boucher, and oh, it's my fault. I should have come over. And it's like, okay, what's this about?
Yeah.
So the killer strikes again. This time, the woman at a clothing store. This is not a great scene because we don't know this. Was this the woman that that I was just talking about? Because if it's not that woman, then we've never met this woman before.
Yeah, I think it was a different woman.
Which is my problem with this scene is we don't know who this is. It's not like Barbara Boucher. We meet right away. She could be our main character. That's kind of emotionally involving.
Yeah, and then
plus she's Barbara Boucher. She's hot
and naked. Then this scene's kind of weird too because you don't really understand what's happening at first.
Well, so the police show up right away.
Yes.
Like right away. And the reason they show up is they weren't there to investigate a murder. They're there to investigate drugs. That the woman who's working at this clothing store, that they smuggle drugs in through the clothing store, through mannequins or something. There's something like that.
Yeah, well, and then at the scene, they're like, "Hey, we found some like residue of cocaine at the scene, so you better test it."
And then I think this is where we eventually get to the tarantula scene. The tarantula professor, one of the oddest characters, who's talking to Inspector Tellini. He's like, "Hey, this here in this box, this tarantula here, is the most deadly creature on this earth."
Which I don't think tarantulas are poisonous, are they?
That's what I've always heard, but it also could be a translation thing where maybe that's not a tarantula. I don't know, because I've always heard that tarantulas are the hairy ones. I think there are hairy spiders that aren't tarantulas.
I'm looking this up. Are tarantulas poisonous? Their toxicity is a rare occurrence.
Okay, so this is a rare one, then. This is
This is the rarest of tarantulas.
This one bites you, you become Madam Web. That's what this guy does. And the tarantula's in this thing of sand, and then Inspector Tellini notices that it's not sand, and he's like, here, Professor, can you remove this for me safely? And he has to do it really safely because it could kill you in seconds. But he tells the professor, who, if this is drug smuggling, is obviously in on it, what he's going to do. So the professor awkwardly tries to drop the tarantula onto him to kill him. And then the professor runs off and is immediately arrested because the other police are waiting there outside. But yeah, so it's a drug bust, completely unrelated to the killings, although... Does the venom actually come from this? Does the drug, or is it just a coincidence?
I think the venom comes not from the tarantulas, but from the wasps. But then that wouldn't make sense for the name of the movie, The Black Belly of the Tarantula.
Well, it's just, listen, it's a title. Are we going to nitpick giallo titles?
No.
I don't know if your Vice is a locked room and only I have the key is really relevant to the film. It might be. I don't remember. What about Hatchet for the Honeymoon? There wasn't a fucking hatchet in sight in that one.
You're right.
Yeah, they're just awesome titles. You can't complain too much about them.
Dude, I gotta tell you though, this scene, I loved it so much because when the professor scientist guy, when he awkwardly fumbles the tarantula at Tellini and he misses, and Tellini just crushes it with a box of butterflies.
That's right, I forgot about that.
and he holds up the cocaine and he says something along the lines of like, "Yeah, if this was going through customs, nobody would have wanted to put their fingers in here."
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah,
and I'm like,
so
that is brilliant.
Yeah, that is, in a weird way, it kind of makes sense. But also, like, tarantula's shitting in that cocaine, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, right? Or it's losing its little bitty hairs in there. You know, I don't want tarantula hair cocaine.
Yeah,
I want my cocaine clean and cut.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So that scene's kind of fun. And then I think it's here from this like university, Tellini's leaving, and then in his car he's held at gunpoint by the husband, Paolo, Barbara Boucher's husband, and he's like, "Listen, I'm innocent." but you don't believe me, and all I'm gonna ask, I think he's like offers to kind of work with him, but he also says like, just, I'm gonna find out who did this and don't get in my way.
Tellini's got a great line. He goes, "Oh, you want me to believe you've got a gun pointed at me? That's an odd way of trying to get me to get it on your side or something."
This is the Jason Bourne scenario. You know how many times Jason Bourne's pointed a gun at someone and then tried to convince them that I'm not going to hurt you, I'm not a bad guy, but it's like, I have to defend myself too, you know? Oh, I guess that's before, I have it in my notes, that's before the tarantula scene. That must be after Tellini's leaving the store.
Oh, yes,
when they find
right.
that that's a trafficking,
it's also in my
cocaine
notes,
trafficking
right
thing.
After the store.
So, and I guess the professor knew the second victim somehow, and I guess he knew her through drug trafficking, probably.
And I think that was their only connection, but I think the police are stumped because they're trying to find the connection between the drug trafficking and the dead woman at the store and the dead woman in her apartment.
And meanwhile, we know, but the characters don't necessarily know that there's blackmail going on. And we see Tellini and his wife have sex with a very, very unblinded window, and it's a creepy weirdo. I thought he was filming it, but he just has photographs. Maybe he's got a sex tape.
No, he is filming it. He is filming it. So this is where I got confused too, Patrick. So I got genuinely confused here.
The photos are evidence that we have more.
No, the photos aren't even of him.
Those photos aren't. Yes, no, you're right. Yeah, that was confusing because there is the scene where Tellini, of all people, has to deliver the photos, or that's kind of his. Yeah.
So they're making copies of these photos of.
You're right, because everyone at work sees his sex tape.
Exactly, and
it's a very hostile work environment. I don't blame that dude for wanting to get out of there. Yeah.
There's literally a room full of dudes watching him bang his wife on like a movie theater screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and he gets up to turn the lights off, and they're like,
they're just being jackasses about it. Like, what the hell is this? Like, So this was odd to me. Laura is on the phone. She's on the phone with the blackmailer. Have we met Laura before? This is Claudine Auger.
She's the one who
owns
the
the
spa,
massage
right?
parlor, which at first we just think it's a massage parlor. Later on, it's like a full-on spa. But I don't think we see her early on, though.
I think she talks to the woman at the beginning of the movie.
Maybe briefly. I know it's Barbara Bach answers the phone. Well, no, we had seen her before. I don't know if we truly met her because she's been kind of in the background, like driving around. I think she drove by the store when the police were there or something. Like, she's been in the background somewhere. I've taken notes of that. But she phones the blackmailer and tells him not to send the photos, whichever photos they're talking about.
It's the photos of Maria and her lover, who I think is named... No. I forget who her... No, I don't know her lover's name, but it's Maria and her lover.
William Shatner. So it's Barbara Boucher, who's long dead at this point. But so the police find the full photo, and they see a plane in the background. Mm-hmm. And they're like, we can tell from the angle of ascent or descent, like, we can kind of tell where this is. And I'm like, can you, though?
You might be able to figure it out.
Maybe. I don't know. But they're able to figure out, like, where it goes. And then Paolo at one point hires a private detective, and the private detective brings him to the blackmailer, and he chases after him on foot. It eventually goes up to the roof. The private detective calls Tellini, and so Tellini is chasing after the two of them. Yeah. There is a struggle, and a dummy falls off, and it's one of the funnier dummy shots I've seen in a long time.
And it doesn't fall down straight, like it kind of strafes because of the wind and because it's so light and it bounces off a window.
It's a fantastic dummy, and the dummy I think is Paolo.
Yes, he falls. Yeah. Paolo sees this guy Mario, who's a blackmailer, and he shows up in like a little red sports car and he chases him to the roof, and as they're on the roof, they get into a struggle, and Paolo falls to his death.
Right.
Tellini had gotten up to the roof, so now he chases Mario down off the roof of the building.
He gets the photos somehow. Does he capture him? Does he arrest the guy?
No, he gets hit by a car.
That's
his own
right.
Sports car, which is driven by a mystery person who runs over on the road.
It's driven by the killer. My first thought was it was driven by Claudine Auger, who at this point could be the killer, but
that's what I thought too.
Specifically we've seen her driving around. But yeah, he gets hit by a car. So he picks up the photos, which are blackmail photos, and what he does is he goes to a bar.
First off, actually, I want to say, you know what was super weird about that scene, about like the foot chase and car chase and stuff? There were no other people in the scene. Like, there were no people on the street. There were no people driving cars down the road. There were no people around. Like, it was like they had blocked off like 5 whole city blocks to film.
I guess I didn't think of that, but maybe you're right. By the way, this should be worth noting. As you said last episode, this is a real movie. This was released by MGM.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how many Euro sleaze films, Euro trash films MGM would have released in the 70s, but at least one. And the score is by Ennio Morricone, and the score is great. It's not even comparable to his spaghetti western scores, which is obviously what he's best known for. But the score is really good. It has this beautiful kind of love theme kind of thing. I thought the music was really good. Morricone is my favorite composer, so I'm biased, but the score was great.
It was. I agree.
And I did mention the all-stars cast, so I guess, my guess is this movie had a pretty big budget.
It must have, and I wonder how well it did in Italy and internationally.
Yeah, who knows.
But again, with such a big budget, they did kind of odd things. Or if it had a big budget, I don't know.
Let me ask what you mean by that, because
well,
I would say the genre lends itself to weird things happening.
Okay, because I was going to say, just
the twist?
Yeah, I guess the twist, or the kind of storylines don't really seem to go anywhere. Things just kind of end. All the dumb stuff with the tarantula. Yeah.
The tarantula was the real standout scene of, what the hell is this? Why is this in the movie? But I guess slasher movies do this too, but, giallo films are often compared to slasher films of, the 80s, because they were the proto-slasher in some ways. I've always felt that though they're extremely violent, and in that sense they're more slasher, I've always felt they are 1940s film noir in color and in Europe. And when you get storylines that don't really go anywhere, think your classic mystery red herring.
Yes.
But slasher movies do that too. Slasher movies, some of them go way too hard on, oh, this person is clearly the killer, and it's it's not because it's so obvious. Because that's kind of what they're doing with the husband early on in here. And I know that's not necessarily what you were saying, but
some of the movie just feels a little cheap as well. Kind of what I mentioned, this chase scene where there's nobody on the streets. And even if it had been a movie with a bigger budget, you would have even had a worker on the roof, that you would have run past.
Yeah, but I thought it was,
can't go up there. Or
I thought it was at least shot really well, though.
It was shot really well. I have no problem with that. But it was.
See, I didn't think. I guess I didn't really notice the lack of extras that you did, but also regardless, now that you point that out and I agree with you, I do not come to the same conclusion. I did not feel this movie felt cheap, at least in that scene.
Yeah, I think another thing that kind of makes this movie feel cheaper than it is.
They didn't skimp on the nudity clauses. That's
no,
for sure.
They didn't. But it's always that bright red blood that you have in this period of movies.
That's Italy. That's Italy.
Exactly. And it's just it always just looks so silly. Which I'm saying that, but also you had bright red blood in Lone Wolf and Cub as well. That was literally shooting out of people.
Well, yeah, that's its own thing too. But yeah, anyways, Tellini gets these photographs, and he goes to the bar, basically to kind of scout it out, and then a woman collects them from him. But he follows the woman, because the woman collects them thinking he's the blackmailer. Mm-hmm. But really, he's going there to potentially find out who the blackmailer is. So he follows her home, knocks on her door, and she sees him and is just leave me alone, I don't want to have to do it. And he's like, no, I'm a police officer, I'm here to help you. And meanwhile, there's the killer is trying to get in the other door or something. He's already in the apartment.
Her apartment, I guess. Yeah.
But I say it could be she.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Well, I mean, I
thought it was what's her face
I thought it was Cameron Mitchell. There's a the mannequin scene, the clothing store, that entire scene felt like something straight out of Blood and Black Lace, which, spoilers, Cameron Mitchell's the killer in that movie because he runs a fashion boutique or something. That's one of the best giallos ever made, but it's one of the best movies ever made, I would say. But I would say at this point in the movie, I didn't really have a great guess. I would have guessed it was Barbara Boucher. Or not Barbara Boucher, sorry, Claudine Auger.
Yeah, she's Laura, right?
Yes, Laura. We haven't really seen the killer that much. I guess you could, when he's kind of wrestling with Barbara Boucher, we probably see enough to say it's a man. It's a 6-foot-tall man, but I don't really remember specifically. But I've seen giallos where the killer turns out to be a woman, and it's just you are kind of just predisposed to assume the killer's a man. And I guess Deep Red is a little bit like that, although they end up kind of being two killers. And then A Bay of Blood, I think that one's a multiple killer one as well. Yes, the killer's trying to get in, and this poor woman, this woman being blackmailed, says, "Okay, thank you for your help. I'll talk to you tomorrow," which is like an instant death sentence because
The best part, the best part,
the killer's
like,
right there.
I know. I love how he's like, "No, I need to talk to you now." She goes, "I just don't think I can handle it today. I've had so
And he's
much
like,
stress."
"Oh, you're not," and he says you're not safe here, but then he still kind of lets her just be on her own. Ugh.
Yeah, and then my favorite part is, like, after she gets killed.
Are we sure he quit or was he fired?
I know, right? After she gets killed, he's talking to his wife, and Tellini's like, "Oh, I just let another woman die last night. I really hate this job." It's like this depressed cop, this depressed detective.
Yeah, who's got a gorgeous wife, a nice, not super big, but a beautiful apartment nonetheless. I love his wife. She's great. So this is when the police all watch Tellini's sex tape.
Yeah.
And they tease him about it. And then he goes back home. Or he goes back home, but then they end up talking in the park, he and his wife. And he says he's resigned. And she, like, wants to know why. And he's like, I'm not going to get into it because obviously she's involved. And then Tellini gets in a car, and there's a truck carrying, like, what would you call these, like, big iron poles? I don't know what to call them.
Yeah, that's about it.
Just backs right into him, and he ducks. He's able to save his life. But this is a Final Destination 2, as someone dies like this. And Final Destination 2 also has the logs in the opening scene. But, like, it also reminded me of The Omen with David Warner getting decapitated by that plate glass. But yeah, so he survives, and then he runs up to the truck, and the killer's gone. And then, meanwhile, we cut over to the spa, and this is when we really find out it's a spa. It's not just a massage parlor or whatever. But Jenny, Barbara Bach, wants to resign because of all the weird stuff that's been going on with the photographs. So the spa is running this blackmailing thing.
Mm-hmm.
Laura is the mastermind, or apparently is the mastermind. Laura Claudine-Auger, the owner of the spa. Jenny wants to leave. Jenny was in on it in some capacity. We don't really know how.
She said that all the women who have been in these photographs have been murdered. She goes, and the next one up is me. So I'm out of here. I'm leaving.
The next one up is she's not in the photographs.
Oh yeah, that's right. Maybe
No,
so.
she's worried about the police catching on.
Okay, yeah, you're probably
because
right.
she's worried from a completely different criminal angle of like the police are going to keep. They're going to come back to us, and so she's going to quit. I guess immediately she's homeless because she calls up a friend and says, "I don't have a place to stay tonight." And it's like, did she sleep at the spa? What was her living situation prior to this? And then she, of course, goes to that friend's house, gets naked, and then the friend, who we never see, so it's like obviously the friend's the killer, comes into her room and she, screams, and then the same old thing with the paralyzing and then the killing.
Mm-hmm.
Downright iconic shot of him, and I'll say him at this point, let's stop the charade, lifting the knife up, and the knife, like the shine from the knife
great.
and the light before it coming down. Like, that's, if I had to sum up giallo in one shot, it's that. But no, very memorable scene. I would say kind of from this moment on, the movie's amazing. I thought it was like decent before. I think this movie has an incredible third act.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
Okay, you agree. I wasn't sure if you'd agree because the twist is kind of silly. If we,
I mean, it is, but the movie itself is a little silly. So yeah.
Also, I should say that Jenny did say she was going to go to the police. She told Laura that, and Laura's again the mastermind. So I think this could be like Laura could be the killer, but like it's not Laura. Spoilers. Speaking of silly, in the morning there's a garbage man picking up garbage, and he can't lift the bag, and it turns out it's because there's a dead woman in there. There's Agent XXX, which I'm going to assume the killer dropped that garbage bag off someplace else, because otherwise that's like a dead giveaway.
And that's kind of what I thought too, and I was like, man, I'll go with it.
So Tellini finally shows up to the spa to ask some questions to these people who are obviously behind it, and he ends up questioning each employee individually. There's kind of a gay guy, right? Is that what they were doing with him? Yeah, he's a small part. I kind of liked him. It wasn't horrifically offensive as far as 70s gay depictions go. I like when he brings that blind masseuse in there. Or I believe it's a masseur. Masseur would be the male term.
Yes.
The blind masseur comes in, and he just asks one question. Can you remove your sunglasses? And he does, and his eyes are like clearly like
unseeing, I guess.
Yeah, foggy, milky, and he's like, okay, that's fine. You're all right. I like how brief and quick that was. And he's questioning Laura, and Laura later tells him she can help him find the killer. And she calls him at night in a panic, claiming she's found proof. Mm-hmm. So Tellini wakes up in the middle of the night. His wife wakes up too, and she's like, "Be safe. Don't be gone long." And he's like, "I'll call you." He arrives at the spa. It's completely empty. It's quiet. And then he finds a dead Claudine Auger, a dead Laura, by like the shower. And next to her dead body, he sees this little thing, and it's like a glass contact. And so suddenly he's like, "Oh, I see what's going on here." It's a nice reveal. Nice reveal. I don't know why he assumes this, but he assumes correctly that the killer's going after his wife.
Yeah, I know. And I thought that's interesting. Oh, is it because
they haven't even been blackmailed yet? Or I guess the sex tape was the blackmail, but like the entirety of the police department saw it. Like I don't. They're clearly not paying.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess that's the reason. Perhaps.
But I guess the killer even in on the blackmail thing? I'm going to say no. I think the blackmail thing is slightly related, but ultimately unrelated.
Well, also, did Laura know that he was the killer the whole time? Because he must be helping in the blackmailing if he's like taking photos.
That's what I'm going to say is I'm going to say she did not know he wasn't blind. I'm going to say she did not know he specifically was the killer. When she told Tellini that I can help you find the killer, she knew it was someone who worked for her, and she just needed to do something to figure out. And then maybe she thought it was the gay guy. I don't know.
How dare her? I don't remember anything he said, but every time he walked past like a woman, he would like make a comment like, "Oh, you're in that machine again." It was great.
Yeah, we've spent more time talking about this guy than he has screen time, probably. Yes. Honestly, I think we have. But so the killer, the masseur, who I'm not even sure what the fuck his name is. In fact, Wikipedia just lists him as masseuse or masseur. They don't even give his name. They say his name at like the end of the movie, but it's just like he's the killer because it's a twist. He's not the killer because he's a well-developed character, really. But he arrives at Tellini's home to terrorize his wife. There was a setup where they had like a neighborhood cat that would come by, and she would like let him in, and then she sees the cat at the window, and so that's kind of what brings the killer in, and the two of them are fighting and struggling, and she gets stabbed with the tarantula venom. Yeah. So she's paralyzed, and Tellini gets home in time to keep him from stabbing her, and he arrives and immediately holds the guy at gunpoint. But then when he sees what's happened to her, he kind of drops his gun, and then they just duke it out. And he seemingly kills the guy in rage, and then goes to be by his wife. And then we kind of cut to I thought there was going to be something where he like comes back, the killer, because it kind of just ended pretty quickly. But I thought him drawing his attention to his wife was going to be a chance for another scare or something. They didn't do that though.
No, and you know why though? It's because this is a movie about a very competent police officer.
You're right. He is. And again, maybe this is something we miss from giallos, usually following like musicians and like journalists and authors going around not knowing what the fuck they're doing. This guy's pretty competent. And he's a good husband.
Yes, yeah.
Because that's where we cut to next. He's in the hospital, and his wife's recovering, and he learns that she will recover. She'll make a full recovery like the next morning or something like that from whatever venom is in her. And we also kind of learn vaguely that the masseur faked his own blindness after he killed his wife or something, and then like now he kills people to kind of recreate that thrill or something. It's really like it doesn't even matter. The character is barely a character. No. It's just like
he's just a murderer who is like part of a larger story involving competent police work and a drug ring. Oh, and blackmailing.
Yeah, and then, like, in a moment or a scene that I actually found quite poignant, you were complaining about lack of extras earlier. How about this scene? Where he just kind of, like, leaves the hospital. He's just, like, walking around aimlessly in the city, and it's just this, like, and again, the sad Morricone music's playing, and it's just, like, depressing, like, seeing this guy. This guy is a hero. And what's he gotten for it? His wife almost got killed, and his colleagues are laughing at his sex tape, and it's just like, and he hates his job, and it's just like, what does he have left? He's got his wife left, obviously, but like, it's just kind of like sad and depressing and poignant, and the kind of emotional beat. It's a lot less pronounced, but I would almost compare it to like First Blood. Like First Blood ends on a very poignant note, but that's also a much more specific note. And this one is more like kind of vague. But I think because the movie's done such a good job with this character, I feel 100% like what he's feeling. Like I feel like he's just this kind of helplessness, and it's like, I've done all this stuff and life still sucks. I hate my job, and and if that's not a feeling I can relate to, I don't know what is. I mean,
if this movie had started out with with him narrating over the very beginning of this movie, saying something like, "This is my last case," or "This was my last case," or
or ended with narrating, or started with it.
Sorry, began. Or actually, I guess either or. Either way, if you have him kind of explaining,
she was a hard dame, and
yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I really liked this ending. As I said, I loved the last act. From the Barbara Bach death scene on, I think this movie's great. I think it's decent before that. But yeah, so I guess we're leading off with, Jim, what are your thoughts on Black Belly of the Tarantula? Well, I just kind of shared mine. I think this is a good movie, absolutely elevated by its last act, elevated by some of the performances, which is not something I would usually say about giallos, because you usually don't pick up on nuances in the acting, or you certainly don't always, because of the weird dubbing and everything. But to me, there's nuances to Giancarlo Giannini's performances, as well as Stefania Sandrelli's, his wife. A much less depthful character, but I think
she still adds to the story.
Her performance as his wife informs his character, I guess, and that's part of what makes this ending work so well, and that's because that relationship's been so well developed, and the two of them have chemistry and all this. Maybe it's because they're the only two Italian actors in the fucking movie. I don't know. Like, everyone else is speaking their own language, or But yeah, Jim, what about you? What are your thoughts?
I was very surprised by how much I liked this movie. I thought when I was like, when you said it's going to be a giallo, I was like, oh my god, here we go again. Which it's not.
Which giallos are awesome. Generally, the ones we've done,
they are awesome. But
Deep Red, hello.
Listen, great movie. I agree with you, but sometimes like the dubbing is just bad, and it just takes me out of it, and I'm like, oh man. But I was actually surprised by how much I enjoyed this. Well, and then this, I think. Something that was so charming about this, and you've already touched on it, but it's the relationship between Tellini and his wife. You have this one kind of side character who
an incredibly wholesome relationship for what's otherwise a sleazy movie.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not more sleazy than the average giallo, but the average giallo is a sleaze fest, the likes of which American film has never seen, except for Body Double and a handful of the Showgirls and a handful of others. Pretty much Basic Instinct.
Yeah, but with this movie, I was surprised that you did have this wholesome relationship where his wife was kind of keeping him sane.
Absolutely.
He kept on coming back to her for support.
Well, yeah, he can't go to anyone that he works with. They've seen him naked. Well, I guess she has too. But...
And they've laughed for hours about it.
Yeah, she presumably hasn't laughed at him since their honeymoon.
All the characters were just so interesting. Even all the side characters, like even that gay character, they even took the time to just like...
all 45 seconds.
Yeah, but I just loved him so much.
But do you agree with me that like, you could tell he was gay, and it was kind of comedy, but it wasn't offensive?
No, exactly. It was just...
I just think of... one of the Pink Panther sequels, which was mid-70s, where one of the characters, the butler, is secretly like a drag queen, and there's a scene that when I was a kid, I could have sworn the scene was 45 minutes, and it's not, but it seems like it. When Peter Sellers goes down to the drag club, and it's just like really uncomfortable, and it was uncomfortable to me as a kid because gay panic, but like now it's like uncomfortable just because it's bad and it's stupid.
Yeah, whereas in this, he's not a stereotype, he's not a caricature, right? He's just like a sassy gay man.
Sure, and they exist.
Yeah.
They're out there.
But I loved the different, I guess, illegal elements to the story. You
like the tarantula cocaine smuggling?
Yeah, I thought that was... Dude, Patrick, I don't think I can...
As an out-of-left-field scene, that scene was a lot of fun.
Well, and I don't think I can describe to you how amazing I thought it was when he's holding up the case with the tarantula in it, and he's like, yeah, that's clearly cocaine. And, a border guard wouldn't put his finger in there. And I was like, holy shit. That's
actually brilliant.
I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, because I think he said something like he got the tarantula from like Colombia or like somewhere in South America.
He said, I got it from the Orient. I thought this movie had like a lot of, maybe not like a lot, but it had comedic moments kind of peppered throughout.
Some unintentional with the dummy.
Yes, but then
that dummy was amazing. I loved that dummy.
But I even liked that side character of that detective that Paolo hires. This like
we don't get a ton of him.
Out of shape, and clearly he's not that great at his job. I don't know, he was just good.
He found the blackmailer before Tellini did. He found the blackmailer before the police did.
Yeah. I liked even the murder mystery aspect, which I guess is most of the movie.
Well, that's what I was going to say is because as much as I like this movie, and I led off by saying I really like this movie, especially the last third or so. That's my biggest problem is the mystery kind of sucks. It's not a very good mystery. You don't know what's going on half the time.
No, and again,
the tying between the blackmail and the murder, it's like, was the blackmail all along a red herring, or was there really a relationship, or was it just, did he just kind of happen to know they were also blackmailing because he secretly isn't blind? I guess it could have been that.
Yeah, well, then also, too, I mean, as you and I have both kind of proved, this movie is a little confusing at some points because you're not entirely sure what's going on. You're not sure if you've seen a character on screen before.
Italian films rarely make sense. That's true.
Yeah, and then like the stuff about the murder, how did he get into the woman's apartment? How is he waiting in her apartment for her? I will say about all that, I like the method of killing. I like the brutality.
It's a unique method, and that like what we like in like slasher movies is like a variety in killing, and here he kills the same way every time, but it's a good way. It's a good way, but that's also like that's the serial killer thing. It's his MO, and it's a terrifying way. And I wish they communicated earlier. I wish they could have communicated it more visually that the women are alive.
I think they did right after the first murder, didn't they?
No, they do, but I'm saying visually. I wish we could have maybe seen Barbara Boucher blink or something, but maybe that would have just looked like a mistake. I don't know. I think Barbara Bach might blink.
Yeah, or even just like some eye twitching or something, and you realize, oh, maybe there's
some sweat dripping down or something.
Yeah,
we got a lot of shots of naked flesh. We could have had sweat going down one of them. So, Jim, which of these two films do you prefer? Lone Wolf and Cub, Sword of Vengeance? Is that the name of it?
Yes. Yeah.
Or Black Belly of the Tarantula?
This one was actually, for me, surprisingly tougher than I thought it was going to be. I am going to have to give it to Lone Wolf and Cub, though, just because I like all the sword stuff. I like the dismemberment. I love the spraying blood. But Black Belly of the Tarantula is a very close second. Just because it surprised me so much.
Well, it's definitely not third.
No. Fuck off.
What the fuck what are you saying? Listen to yourself.
Well, wait, it was. What do you mean? What am I saying? It was a close second. It was almost a tie for me, bud. That's
okay,
then
saying. Say that.
Al.
Then say
it
that.
Was very close. It was hard to choose. I'm going with the samurai one because there's more blood and gore and people being cut up and samurai being angry and grunting at each other. That's yeah.
Every line of dialogue is by that guy. But yeah, I do agree with you that this was tough. Giallos are, I would say, outside of spaghetti westerns, giallos are like my favorite genre of film, and not in the sense that like I love everyone I've seen, but I've just like, I think giallos have a very high floor for me. Even a not very good one, I'm going to enjoy it because I just like that style.
Of course, I understand that, yeah.
I do think I have to go with Lone Wolf and Cub in that I wanted the story to have been told a different way than it was. But I thought there were moments of poignancy that permeated through the violence. And I'm thinking not even just like well, I guess this is related, like when he's having the kid choose between beach volleyball and a sword to kill himself with or whatever. But
yeah.
all of the dialogue about choosing the middle ground, and then what they do even visually to show that, I thought was really neat. Like I loved all of that stuff. I do like Black Belly the Tarantula quite a bit, and I do like that it has moments of poignancy. There are moments of poignancy, quite frankly, that you don't see often in that genre, at least not in the films that I've seen from it. but Lone Wolf and Cub was just slightly better for me. I don't know how else to put it. It's just I liked them both very similarly. I would give them the same rating down to the half star on Letterboxd. I just slightly prefer Lone Wolf and Cub.
Now, is it because of like... Well, because for me, I think also, too, it was just more visually interesting. I liked the setting.
Not quite sure I agree with that. I definitely understand what you mean. I do think... I mentioned the Barbara Bach death. There are moments of, like, the cinematography is just like, wow. Like, and that's true of Italian films in general, somehow. I don't know how they do it. I don't know what's in the water over there. There's just great cinematography, even in their shitty exploitation movies in many instances. And this isn't one of those, but... Well,
and it's funny, too, because when I was watching it, Black Belly of the Tarantula, I thought to myself, wow, this movie's so colorful. And it's actually a really pretty-looking movie. And everybody in it is dressed well, and they're all attractive.
Yeah, I read somewhere that Giancarlo Giannini, who is a good-looking guy, he's got good 70s mustache going, but apparently he was like a heartthrob in Italy.
I can imagine.
Like he was I don't know, he's like a Ryan Gosling type.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to see this movie that is actually very colorful, and, you know, it has a lot of that 70s color, you know, and you have that bright blood, and everybody's wearing colorful clothes and driving colorful cars, and then you kind of go to this samurai movie where everybody's ugly or dead.
Or terrible haircuts.
Yeah, terrible haircuts. And
fake facial hair.
Yeah, and then the color palette is all kind of like green and brown. Yeah, it was interesting. Though, again, I say visually I preferred Lone Wolf and Cub, but that just might be my bias kicking in because I think samurais are pretty cool, you know?
And listen, no one is going to say they aren't.
No.
But I think a naked Barbara Boucher is pretty cool, too. So
I also agree.
You're talking about the other film being better visually. I don't know if I can agree with that. So I'm going to ask the question of how do you think this works as a double feature? I'm going to lean into something you said, which you might have said by mistake, but you were talking about going from Black Belly the Tarantula to Lone Wolf and Cub. Is that what the order you would want? I think these are both second movies.
I agree. I think they are as well. And I would say that I would have to put Black Belly of the Tarantula after Lone Wolf and Cub, just because it is a little more out there. It is...
I don't have a great answer. I could see it going either way. I think if it comes down to it, between these two movies, I think Black Belly of the Tarantula is more likely to be like a mainstream film in America. You know what I mean? Like, if you can just imagine this completely redone with American actors and speaking English and stuff, like, it wouldn't be shocking that this movie could be a mainstream film, where it would be shocking for some of those giallos, some of the Lucio Fulci ones.
Well, I think kind of aping off what you said about them both being second movies, the difficulty is with Lone Wolf and Cub, the violence, the gore, that kind of puts it in a second movie class. The fact that, like, even just the story is this ronin, this wandering swordsman. I keep saying that, but this ronin, he's kind of looking for revenge. It's a revenge movie, which really kind of puts it into second movie tier, much like that movie that you mentioned at the beginning. That's one of the greatest movies we've ever covered on the
Street
podcast.
Fighter?
Thank you, The Street Fighter. You can really see where a movie like this influenced, like I said earlier, Tarantino with Kill Bill. And Kill Bill is in itself, like, it's a mainstream movie, but it has that second movie energy to it.
Yeah.
I can't exactly put my finger on what makes Lone Wolf and Cub.
See, I don't like Kill Bill, so I'm not going too hard in agreement with your statements here.
But then, Black Belly of the Tarantula is just kind of a weird movie that's also a little confusing, but it's a great movie full of fantastic actors. The thing that kind of keeps it from being a first movie is, again, what you said. It's, if it had been done in American, it would probably be a first movie. But you have a very 70s Italian movie where you have people who are speaking different languages all working together on the same film.
Well, sure. And
this kind of silly murderer going around freezing people before he guts them.
Yeah, it's like Banjo-Tooie. He used the ice egg.
Yes, that's exactly it, yeah.
But yeah, I don't really know how it works as a double feature. Let's just assume like we were keeping the order because I don't really have strong thoughts one way or the other. I do think they're very different styles of film. These are very different. It's interesting. They're very different styles of film, but both styles have had unique influences on Western film, even though they are very uniquely of their country. The Ronin movie, which inspired spaghetti westerns, which aren't American, but would also inspire things like Mandalorian, all this crap. Mm-hmm. John Wick, I think you could say just modern action has kind of been influenced by the Ronin. I know Keanu Reeves literally made a 47 Ronin, the famous flop of the film.
Yes, yeah.
And then obviously the giallo having an influence on slasher movies. And what I like about people who complain about modern horror being bad are idiots. They're not looking at the right things, clearly. But one of the beauties of the internet, and this is what I was saying about earlier about like Shogun Assassin's probably harder to find than it used to be because now we can easily find the original and there's just not really a need for it. You have a huge crop of modern horror filmmakers that are influenced by everything under the sun from any country, and that's something that even though there were some movies in the 80s, some slasher movies that might have been influenced by certain things in 70s giallo movies, specifically the famous one is Friday the 13th Part 2 rips off like an entire scene from A Bay of Blood starring Claudine Auger. But now, like, it doesn't even have to be like a giallo type thing. Like Malignant was clearly influenced by giallos, and I remember I was a sucker because there was an interview a long time ago, long before Malignant came out, probably when it was in production, saying James Wan, and this is probably like a clickbait headline, but at the same time, why would you do a clickbait for something that only means something to like a handful of people? But like, it's like James Wan's next movie is going to be a giallo, and I'm like, no way, awesome. And then it's like he had this movie Malignant coming out. I'm like, is this the giallo? And then I saw it, and it's not a giallo, but there's clearly an influence. And then that film was more influenced by Basket Case than it was by Black Belly the Tarantula, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I think if you were to narrow it down to these two films in particular, I think Lone Wolf and Cub is more influential than Black Belly the Tarantula, but I do think you have this influence from both these genres. And I think on that end it makes for a kind of an interesting double feature, just if you're a fan of genre movies, kind of seeing where some of your favorites might have kind of gotten their start or gotten their inspiration from.
Yeah.
I think this is pretty good. Otherwise, like, not too many thoughts on it as a double feature other than the two movies are really good, so no complaints.
That's kind of where I sit. Both movies are really good. If you want
both under 2 hours, not an unreasonably length.
Yeah, they're both about an hour and a half, aren't they?
Yeah, and I was a little worried because those Japanese movies about people wandering around on foot, those with Kurosawa and stuff, those can be long movies.
If you wanted to tie these two together as well somehow, I guess you could say that both movies are saying something deeper than what's just being portrayed on the surface. Like with Lone Wolf and Cub, there's this idea of honor and somebody's struggle of having to kind of lose honor or make choices to, support your family, even if you don't really want to, even if that's not the right thing to do necessarily, right? Like letting your kid choose.
Until the last part, the weird thing is what you just said could apply to Black Belly the Tarantula. I think you could argue Black Belly the Tarantula with Tellini, it's like about honor, and it's like idealized version of a police officer, and then him having this job where he just has to, he goes to a crime scene, it's just naked, dead people, and it's just miserable.
And he's
like,
constantly
there's nothing.
failing.
Yeah.
He's constantly looking like a fool, and his wife is there to kind of help him. Really, it's...
Unlike with Ito.
Yeah. I mean, he's there to help his son.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to be able to connect the movies, you'd have to look, I think, a little deeper.
And you know what? I don't think we have to. I think we can just say they're good movies. And
I agree.
Call it a day.
Yeah.
So, will we have two good movies next time? Well, I can't guarantee that because I've seen both these movies and I know one of them's good. The other one I'm really not sure if it's good or not. But we're going to have a guest next episode, and it might be a while before it comes out because I'm actually going to be going to Spain soon.
You lucky bastard.
I'll be going to the Tabernas Desert to visit some spaghetti western sets and stuff like that. But we've got a couple of 90s classics we got Wild Things, and we got Candyman. So, you know, it's I can tell you Candyman's good. Wild Things, I don't know if Wild Things is good or not. I really don't, and I just saw it the other day. And that's Wild Things is a very confusing movie to me. It's very enjoyable. I mentioned mainstream sleaze earlier, and I mentioned Body Double and Basic Instinct. Wild Things is about as sleazy as it gets, and I respect it for that. I don't know if it's good, though. Okay. But we're going to be having Jared, who was on last season for The Delta Force and Young Rebels, two of the most boring movies we've ever featured, so hopefully this will be a little bit better. But we'll see. I still think that episode was good. I just think those movies are kind of dull. I mean, one of them stars Chuck Norris, you know how it goes. I mean, we did a Chuck Norris movie not too long ago, and you and I had the exact same things to say about it that he and I had a year ago. So, yeah, he's the worst. But Tony Todd, on the other hand, is he the worst?
Never.
No. Is Denise Richards the worst? Well, maybe as an actress. Nev Campbell, she's back.
Oh, that's exciting.
Kevin Bacon. Wild Things is a great cast. Bill Murray's in that.
Well, that's something to look forward to.
Please join us next time, and keep your kids safe. Keep them away from executioners and blind masseurs.